The mysterious disappearance of Brian Schaffer. Imagine a lively Friday night in a crowded college bar filled with laughter and music, and a young medical student who walks in with friends, only to vanish into thin air without a single clue. This is the story of Brian Schaffer, a promising 27-year-old who disappeared from an Ohio bar in 2006, leaving behind a mystery that defies explanation. How does someone vanish from a busy place under the watch of cameras? What happened in those blurry moments after midnight? And why, after nearly 2 decades, are we still searching for answers? Let's step into this puzzling tale, tracing his last night, the strange twists, and the questions that keep this case alive. It was March 31st, 2006, the start of spring break at Ohio State University in Columbus. Brian Schaffer was a second-year medical student, tall, athletic, with a ready smile and a tattoo of the Pearl Jam logo on his arm. He was the kind of guy everyone liked, smart, driven, and down to earth. That evening, he'd finished a tough week of exams and planned to unwind. He started with dinner at a steakhouse with his father, Randy, and his younger brother, Derek, a rare moment of family time after losing his mother to cancer just a month earlier in February. She'd been his rock, and her death hit him hard, leaving a quiet shadow over his usual cheer. After dinner, he hugged his dad goodbye and headed out to meet his best friend, Clint Florence, and another buddy, Meredith Reed, ready to let loose. They kicked off the night at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a popular spot near campus in a busy strip called the Gateway. It was a 2-story bar with a kitschy fish theme, neon signs, wooden tables, and a stage for live music. That night, it was packed with students celebrating the break, the air thick with chatter and the thump of a band. Brian, Clint, and Meredith arrived around 10, grabbing drinks and soaking in the vibe. Brian wore a green t-shirt and jeans, his sandy hair catching the dim lights as he laughed and sipped beers. They bar hopped for a while, hitting a place called the Short North, then another spot nearby, before circling back to the Ugly Tuna around midnight. By then, the drinks had loosened them up, and Brian was in high spirits, dancing and chatting with strangers. Security cameras caught him outside at 1:58 in the morning, standing near the entrance, talking to 2 young women he'd met inside. He waved at someone off-screen, then stepped back into the bar. That was the last time anyone saw him. His friends lost track of him in the crowd. Clint and Meredith figured he'd slipped out early. He'd been drinking. Maybe he'd gotten tired or decided to head home. They left around 3, assuming he'd text them later. But morning came, and Brian didn't answer his phone. His girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner, a med student he'd been dating for years, called him too. No response. She'd been out of town that weekend, and they'd talked earlier about a spring break trip to Florida he'd planned as a surprise, maybe even a hint at a proposal. When he didn't pick up by Saturday, she grew worried. His apartment was a short walk from the bar, so Clint checked there, empty, his bed untouched, his car still parked outside. By Sunday, April 2nd, panic set in. His dad reported him missing, and the Columbus police took over, launching a search that would uncover one baffling detail after another. The Ugly Tuna had 2 exits, a front door under constant camera watch and a service exit through the kitchen that led to a construction site behind the building. The footage from 1:58 showed Brian re-entering the bar, but no camera ever caught him leaving. The front entrance was a choke point, everyone leaving past the lens, and police reviewed every frame from that night. Hundreds of blurry figures stumbled out as the bar closed, but none matched Brian's 6'2" frame or green shirt. The service exit was trickier. It wasn't meant for patrons, and staff said no one unauthorized came through. Beyond it lay a fenced-off construction zone, rough with dirt piles and scaffolding, monitored by its own cameras. Those tapes showed workers and a few late-night stragglers, but no Brian. How could he slip past every eye, human and electronic, in a place buzzing with life? His life before that night offered some context, but no clear answers. Brian was solid. Good grades, a steady relationship, plans to become a doctor like his mom had wanted. Her death in February had shaken him, though. He told friends he was rethinking medicine, maybe dreaming of playing guitar in a band instead, chasing a freer life. He'd even talked about running off to start over, but it was half joking, the kind of thing you say after a beer. Alexis said he'd been quieter lately, still grieving, but nothing drastic, no fights, no debts, no enemies. The night he vanished, He'd called his brother around 9, sounding tired but not desperate. His bank cards and phone stayed silent after that. No pings, no charges, just a dead trail. The police dug in, starting with the obvious. They questioned Clint and Meredith, who stuck to their story. They'd lost him in the chaos and thought he'd left. Both passed polygraphs, their confusion seeming genuine. Detectives searched the bar top to bottom, under tables, in bathrooms, even the air vents. Nothing. They pulled his phone records. The last call was to Alexis at 10:55 that night, a quick check-in before the bars got loud. After that, it went dark, though one odd blip came a week later, on April 7th. Alexis called his number, and it rang once before cutting to voicemail, as if it had powered on for a split second. They traced the signal to a tower miles away in Hilliard, but it was too brief to pinpoint. Was it a glitch, or had someone turned it on? Theories piled up fast. Maybe he'd wandered off drunk and met trouble, a mugging gone wrong, a fall into the nearby Olentangy River. But the river was searched, and no body surfaced. The construction site hinted at an accident. Maybe he'd slipped through the service exit, fallen into a pit, and been buried under concrete poured days later. Police brought in dogs and dug up patches, but found zilch. Some thought he'd staged it, walked out in disguise, ditched his life for a fresh start. He'd left his wallet, keys, and phone behind, sure, but he could have planned ahead, stashed cash somewhere. His accounts stayed untouched, though, and friends swore he wasn't the type to ghost his family. Then there were darker ideas. The bar was crowded. Could someone have lured him away, a stranger, or even someone he knew? No blood, no screams, no witnesses. But in a mob like that, anything could slip by. The ugly tuna sat in a gritty part of town. Crime wasn't rare, and bodies had turned up nearby before. Police grilled regulars, checked known offenders, even floated a serial killer angle. But every lead fizzled. The cameras were the kicker. If he didn't leave, where did he go? Some online sleuths suggested he'd slipped into a wall or a hidden space, but blueprints and searches debunked that. Others pointed to the service exit. Maybe he'd dodged the lens somehow, blending into the night. A year later, in 2007, a strange twist popped up. Someone posted on a memorial site for Brian, claiming he was alive and well, signing off from an internet cafe. Police traced it, but the trail died. Probably a cruel prank. His dad clung to hope, organizing vigils, until a freak accident took him in 2008. A tree fell during a storm, crushing him outside his home. Alexis kept calling Brian's phone, leaving voicemails until the number disconnected in 2009. Volunteers scoured Columbus for years, parks, rivers, old buildings, but turned up empty. In 2020, a tip led to a jacket near the old site, but DNA ruled it out. Nearly 2 decades later, this case won't let go. Brian Schaffer walked into a bar at 1:58 on April 1st, 2006, and vanished, leaving no footprint in a world of eyes. The ugly tuna's long closed, its neon fish faded, but the footage lives on, rewatched, dissected, debated. Was it a slip into the night, a calculated exit, or something no one saw coming? Every angle twists back on itself. Cameras that missed him, a phone that flickered, a life paused mid-breath. This mystery hums with a quiet ache, a question mark over a crowded room. Want to unravel more tales like Brian's, stories of vanishings, clues, and lives left hanging? Join Mystery Pulse to explore the next intriguing puzzle. Subscribe now and hit the bell so you don't miss a single step.